Okay, picture this. You're standing on Mount Kilimanjaro, highest peak in Africa, right? Or maybe wandering the streets of Zanzibar, just soaking in centuries of history.
Amazing images.
Absolutely. But what if I told you Tanzania holds an even deeper secret? We're talking over 1,000,000 years deep.
Ah, the cradle of humankind.
Exactly. The archaeology there literally rewrites the book on early humans.
And what's so fascinating, I think, is how that deep past really shapes Tanzania's modern story. It's not just ancient history collecting dust.
So true. And that's what we're diving into today, Tanzania's whole journey. Our mission really is to explore everything from those ancient roots, the diverse cultures, the tough colonial times, the fight for independence, right up to today's social, economic, and political landscape.
Yeah, we've pulled together a lot of research for you. It covers, well, pretty much everything: a brief history, pre-colonial stuff, the colonial era, independence, what came after, social changes, politics, culture, environment, the works.
And we're going to distill it down for you. We'll pull out the key insights, maybe some surprising facts, the crucial connections, so you can quickly get a real sense of what makes Tanzania tick. We'll touch on ancient migrations, modern economics, wildlife conservation.
Let's get into it.
Okay, first up, let's place Tanzania on the map. We're talking Eastern Africa, big country, almost 1,000,000 square kilometers,
Yeah.
borders the Indian Ocean.
Right, huge landmass, France and Germany combined, roughly.
And it's got these iconic landmarks. Kilimanjaro, obviously Africa's highest peak, 5,895 meters. And the Unguja Archipelago, which most people know as Zanzibar. Beautiful beaches, lots of history there too.
And that geography, it's not just about beauty spots. It's absolutely central to why Tanzania is so historically important. East Africa is, like you said, the cradle of humankind.
Literally.
Literally. The plains in Tanzania hold the oldest hominid discoveries. We're talking over 1,000,000 years old. Plus the earliest evidence of using tools. This is foundational stuff for all humanity.
It's kind of mind-blowing, isn't it? Thinking of Tanzania as the starting point, how did that ancient past and the land itself shape those early migrations?
Well, it certainly wasn't empty or static. Even centuries before the Common Era, you had migrations like Proto-Hamitic groups forming along the Uhuru Mountains.
Okay.
Then around 1000 BCE, you start seeing major waves of Bantu migrations coming from West Africa. They reached the Tanzania Plateau by about 300 CE.
So different groups arriving over time.
Exactly. And they met, they interacted. It led to really interesting cultural exchanges. You had some Bantu groups picking up pastoralism, herding livestock, and some Hamitic groups, traditionally pastoralists, actually started farming and smelting iron. This mixing really laid the groundwork for the diverse societies that came later.
And even before Europeans showed up, there was already a lot going on economically, right? Especially on the coast.
Oh, absolutely. The Swahili cities were trading hubs exposed to Arab culture very early on. The local Swahili Arabs were expert sailors, using dhows for trade and fishing.
And didn't Asian Indians play a role too?
They did. They were involved in building roads, particularly to help the ivory trade. So yeah, it was a vibrant, connected region long before any European powers arrived.
Which makes the arrival of colonialism feel even more like an interruption, a disruption.
A major disruption. And this brings us to the late 19th century. Germany was kind of late to the colonial game and wanted to catch up.
Right, the scramble for Africa.
Pretty much. So in 1891, they acquired Tanganyika from the Sultan of Zanzibar. This became German East Africa.
And their approach, they talked about bringing order and civilization.
Well, yes, they built things, shops, railways, telegraph lines, but the methods, often brutal. The sources talk about harassing the Africans, using excessive semi-government punishments just to get forced labor for building roads and other projects.
So progress came at a huge human cost. It raises that question, doesn't it? Progress for whom?
Exactly. Infrastructure, yes, but built on suffering. Then World War I happens, Germany loses, and Tanganyika's control shifts.
To the British.
Right. It became a British Mandate territory in 1920 under the League of Nations. Later, after World War II in 1946, it became a UN trust territory.
Did that change things significantly with the UN involvement?
Theoretically, yes. There was now this international expectation, especially with things like the 1948 European Convention of Human Rights, that administration should respect human rights, make them paramount. That was the language used.
On paper, at least.
Oh.
But the immediate impact of World War I itself sounds devastating for Tanzanians.
It was catastrophic. The British needed resources, so they started dispossessing African peasants of land, slapping on heavy taxes, pushing cash crops.
Like cotton or coffee?
Things like that, yes. They did develop some transport infrastructure too, but the overall effect for many Africans was described as causing grievousness of suffering. The human costs just kept mounting.
And the British administration itself, how effective was it?
Well, many sources describe the early native administration as, frankly, weak. There were rigid social structures, administrative problems. Later on, this top-down approach continued, like when Ujamaa villages were just declared by decree without real local input or self-rule.
That legacy of top-down rule seems really important for understanding what happened next.
Undeniably, it set the stage for many post-independence challenges, which leads us, naturally, to the independence movement itself.
Things started heating up politically, and then, in 1955, TANU was formed the Tanganyika African National Union, led by Julius Nyerere.
And TANU caught on like wildfire. It gained massive popular support very quickly, unlike its main rival, the United Tanganyika Party, which people apparently saw as more of an elite discussion club.
Interesting contrast. So Julius Nyerere, Tanzania's first president. He's such a key figure, but also quite controversial, isn't he?
Extremely. Look at the scholarship and you see this real debate. Was he this naive idealist, a dreamer, whose vision of African socialism, Ujamaa, just couldn't work in the real world? Or was he deeply, sincerely committed to equality, to lifting up his people, even if that sometimes meant using, well, heavy-handed, top-down governance?
It's a fascinating paradox, that tension between the egalitarian dream and the sometimes authoritarian methods.
Exactly. And it arguably shaped both Tanzania's successes, like national unity, and its economic struggles. It's a product of that immediate post-colonial pressure cooker.
And the core of his vision was Ujamaa, right? Announced in the Arusha Declaration in 1967.
That's right. It wasn't just copying Soviet or European socialism. It was Nyerere's unique African version based on principles like familyhood, cooperation, communal benefit.
And self-reliance was key, too.
Hugely important, avoiding dependence on outside powers. The idea was also about equal development for individuals and really prioritizing agriculture as the base.
And the most dramatic part of this was the villagization program.
Oh, massively dramatic. The goal was to gather the scattered rural population into planned villages, easier to provide schools, healthcare, water, and encourage collective farming.
And the scale was enormous.
Astonishing. By 1980, they had moved 9 million people. That was 97% of the entire rural population into over 8,000 Ujamaa villages. A colossal social engineering project, though often carried out quite forcefully.
Just before the Arusha Declaration, though, something else major happened. The union with Zanzibar.
Yes. In April 1964, Tanganyika and Zanzibar joined to form the United Republic of Tanzania. This happened just a few months after a violent coup d'etat in Zanzibar in January '64.
Was the union smooth?
Not entirely. There were power-sharing struggles early on, and for quite a while, Zanzibar actually kept trying to pull back from the union. Sources mention fears regarding the internal security of the mainland as a factor. It just shows how tricky forging a nation from separate parts can be, especially then.
Okay, so that brings us into the post-independence era, a time of big changes, progress, but also ongoing struggles. Let's talk economy first. Big shifts there.
Huge shifts. Tanzania went from what was called a virtually closed economy under Nyerere's state monopolies, limited foreign trade, to becoming, eventually, one of the most open economies in Africa.
That sounds like a massive turnaround. How did that happen?
Through rapid market liberalization, especially from the mid-'80s onwards. But it wasn't easy. This opening up brought worries about inflation, the currency losing value.
And the legacy of the socialist policies. Did that just disappear?
Not at all. Things like the nationalization of industries had long-lasting effects. So Tanzania's economy today is this complex mix shaped by both the Ujamaa period and the later liberalization.
What about social progress? Education seems like a major focus.
Definitely. Right after independence, you had key education acts, like in 1962 and 1978. The aim was quality education for all, tackling poverty.
And the 1962 Act did some specific things.
Yes, it unified the fragmented system, got rid of bias based on race or social status, and crucially made Swahili the national language and the language used for teaching in primary schools.
That's a big step for national identity.
Huge. And establishing the University College of Dar es Salaam in 1961 was part of that push, too, building a local intellectual base, very much in the spirit of self-reliance from the Arusha Declaration.
And healthcare. Nyerere talked about a development revolution.
He did. The idea was to move away from a system that was heavily private and urban-focused. The new model was decentralized, focusing on villages, preventive care, getting communities involved in building clinics.
Sounds ambitious.
Very. They planned to train whole new types of health workers. But the reality was, Tanzania was vast. Resources were scarce after colonialism. Reaching everyone effectively was, and remains, a massive challenge.
Which connects to the enduring issue of poverty. Despite all the efforts, it's still a major problem.
It is. Tanzania is still classed as underdeveloped. Around 26% of people live in extreme poverty. Human capital levels are low.
And population growth is a factor.
A big one. High population growth puts huge strain on services and resources. And if agricultural productivity doesn't keep up or declines, it really undermines economic growth and poverty reduction efforts. It's a tough cycle.
Shifting gears a bit, let's talk about the region. Tanzania's location is pretty strategic, bordering 8 countries.
Yeah, regional relations are incredibly important. It hasn't always been smooth sailing. Under Nyerere, relations with Uganda got very tense because of hostile elements there.
Didn't Tanzania actually invade Uganda?
It did, yeah. Eventually overthrowing Idi Amin's regime. They also worked to make sure neighboring Burundi and Rwanda weren't harboring groups hostile to Tanzania, so it's played a very active role, sometimes militarily, in regional stability.
And it seems committed to cooperation, too, like with the East African community.
Very committed. Tanzania was a founding member of the original EAC back in 1967 with Kenya and Uganda. That collapsed in 77 due to disagreements.
Political differences, mainly.
Mostly, yeah. Economic and political tensions. But then it was revived around 1999-2000, and now it has a much broader scope: political, economic, social, cultural, environmental, legal cooperation. Tanzania's strong Pan-Africanist stance and its history of supporting liberation movements really fits with this regional commitment.
One thing that really stands out about Tanzania, especially given the region, is its political stability.
It's remarkable. Since independence, it's maintained unity and peace in a way that's often described as enviable compared to some of its neighbors.
How did it manage that, especially with such diversity?
Well, the transition from basically a one-party state under Chama Mapinduzi's CCM
The ruling party for a long time.
still is. They transitioned to a quasi-multi-party system in 1992. There was a conscious effort, though, to try and stop political parties forming along purely ethnic lines, which was seen as a danger.
A delicate balancing act.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And it's largely held. Of course, there have been recent developments. President Magufuli passed away in 2021, succeeded by the vice president, Samia Suluhu Hassan, the country's first female president.
And recent elections.
The 2020 elections were quite contested. CCM won by landslide, but there were concerns raised. Also, like many countries, Tanzania is grappling with modern issues like privacy concerns around new biometric ID cards and a surveillance law passed in 2018.
It's fascinating how these very modern digital age issues intersect with a country that has such deep, ancient roots. Let's talk about those roots of the culture. It sounds incredibly rich.
Oh, incredibly. You're talking 126, maybe even 140 distinct ethnic groups, languages from 10 different linguistic families. It's hugely diverse.
But Swahili holds it together.
Swahili is key. It's the national language, the official lingua franca, widely spoken, used in government, education. It's a powerful unifying force. And then you have these wonderful traditions, elaborate dances, the importance of tea ceremonies and social life.
And music. I understand music is a big deal.
A very big deal. It's described as a multifaceted social, cultural, and political mechanism. It's not just entertainment, it's tied to community survival, preserving heritage, expressing identity.
Still strong in rural areas.
Very vibrant. In urban areas, you see more commercialization, the rise of popular styles like bongo flava, which is huge, and taarab with its coastal influences. It's a real blend of traditional and modern.
Another thing Tanzania is famous for is its wildlife. Incredible natural resources.
Absolutely world-class. Wildlife conservation has a long history there. It evolved from, well, basically uncontrolled hunting in pre-colonial times to colonial game laws.
And then a shift.
A big paradigm shift in the 1970s. The focus moved towards conserving biological diversity as a whole and promoting environmentally friendly tourism. Serengeti National Park, for example, was actually established way back in 1951.
But it's not without challenges, right?
Yeah.
Conservation efforts face hurdles.
Significant ones. Climate change is impacting habitats. Land use conflicts are a constant issue. And there's this underlying problem described in some sources as a long-standing and venomous lack of national unity and trust around conservation.
What does that mean in practice?
Often it stems from past grievances, like how land was taken for parks without local consent, or communities feeling they don't benefit enough from the tourism revenue generated on their doorstep. It makes genuine collaboration really difficult.
That's a really important point. So wrapping up the challenges, what are the big contemporary issues Tanzania is grappling with today?
Well, despite the economic growth we mentioned, per capita income is still low, around US $300, which is below regional averages. Social service delivery, healthcare, education can be patchy and poor, especially outside urban centers. Infrastructure still needs major investment.
And that growth rate, while good, isn't enough.
The sing-
That's a sobering reality. But let's end on the future prospects. Despite the challenges, there's potential, right?
Definitely. Tanzania has significant economic potential. Its location is strategic in a growing East Africa. There's a real push for more economic integration through the EAC.
And that National Development Vision 2025.
Yes, the goal is to reach middle-income country status. And that impressive GDP growth over the last 15 plus years shows there's momentum. It's been one of Africa's faster-growing economies.
But potential pressures, too.
For sure. Balancing the growth with protecting those incredible natural resources, the wildlife, the ecosystems that support ecotourism will be critical. And then there's the potential impact of oil and gas finds. Big opportunities, but also big risks if not managed sustainably and equitably.
So for you listening, when you take all this in, Tanzania's journey is just incredible, from literally being the cradle of humankind to the complexities of colonialism, forging this stable nation with Nyerere's unique vision, and now pushing for growth while tackling these deep-seated challenges.
Yeah.
The resilience is just remarkable.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it leaves us with a big question, perhaps. Given Tanzania's incredibly deep history, its vibrant culture, its achievement of stability in a tough neighborhood, what lessons can we draw from its ongoing story? What can it teach us about building a nation, about trying to balance idealism with the practical realities, and about navigating the sheer complexity of development in our world today?